Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Gorman. This is my
Brenda.
co-host, Brenda Hattrick, and welcome to the pregame of the Candid conversation we have coming up.
Yeah, first of the 2025
That's right.
season,
That's right.
if you will. Yeah.
First, do we have another one scheduled? I'm not sure. They're a little more sporadic.
Well, we do
than
have,
they used to be during
we do
COVID.
have another one in the queue. So yeah, I think we have two or three topics. We definitely have another candid conversation coming, most likely at the after summer. But yeah, we have one in the queue for sure to come, and we have a great one today, transformational leadership. We've got a lot of, we have, three esteemed panelists and, that can talk about transformational leadership from, our purview as media, but clearly, this is a topic that is relevant to media, but relevant, I think, to, anyone in business this year, maybe in current times, right? To be able to transform their leadership, if you will, at the basic and get focused and move their companies forward, given a lot of maybe uncertainty.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a topic that is relevant, but I think one that has been around year after year after year. I can remember when I started my career, 10 years ago. No comment.
Right.
No comment. No, right out in college.
Right.
No
That's
comments in
right.
the comment section.
That's right.
But there was every year, not every year, but let's say every 5 years, there was a new buzzword for how you're going to rebuild these companies, how you're going to reorganize. I remember the organization that I joined out of grad school. They had just gone through the program BEST to reconfigure the organization, etc. I know in media, there's been in traditional media a lot of discussion over the years about things have to change, and as we talked about change, we still see a lot of those same old habits around, but now I think we're going to see some acceleration as we start seeing companies split.
For sure.
Of course, viewing habits have already changed, right? I mean,
For sure.
we were just talking about that earlier today.
Yeah.
So
you know what doesn't change is sports.
Because I love sports.
Because I know how much you love it. And listen, I'm just gonna say the NBA championships, the NHL, they're going on, and being a true homer for Pittsburgh, I don't really give a crap because there's not a Pittsburgh team in either of those. But I did hear ratings were good for both of those events. And I'm not gonna lie, I have caught a couple games, both for hockey and for basketball. So that's good news for our clients or the industry that's covering those events. The other thing I wanted to talk about, sports related, is something that happens every 4 years, not the Olympics, but the World Cup. And super cool. That's in the North America this year for those of us who love soccer, as we call it, or football. Super, other great thing about it is we're welcoming the Fox O&O stations to the Matrix family, and we're in process of getting them up and running. And I know that Fox is covering the World Cup. So, and as will some of our other clients. So congrats to everyone, and wishing.
Are you going to any of the games?
We have talked about it, yes, as a family.
So they won't go because they won't be able to get it organized.
I know.
Let me tell you, it's like the day before the game. Did you guys still want to go?
Did we go?
Yeah.
No, not yet. But the other thing that happens this time of year, and I think it's making a comeback, media adjacent, is blockbuster season. And I mentioned blockbuster movies because I know you've been to see, well, Mission Impossible.
Which I think somebody said Mission Impossible is saving the movie theater. I don't know about that. It wasn't in my. Listen, I like action movies, right? And in my top 5, certainly the original Bourne Identity is in there. I like, those kind of action. I like Mission Impossible series, but this one to me was just ludicrous and ridiculous. I was
don't let Tom Cruise know.
Not a fan.
If you're watching, Tom, that's Mark Gorman making that statement. I anticipate that I'll go see that this weekend. In Pittsburgh, we're hosting the U.S. Golf Championship and U.S. Open here in Pittsburgh. So we're excited. My family will be attending that this weekend. as gallery participants, not as golfers. I'm hopeful, because this is the other thing we've had a ton of this year in Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania, maybe across the whole country, is rain. So I'm hopeful we have 90-degree days and no rain.
Well,
Lots of humidity.
no rain. Now we're in orange pollution level from the Canadian fires for the first day. So it'll be a beautiful weekend.
So we have all of that. So what else is happening from your perspective, Mark? I know you've got a trip to Europe planned this summer.
Oh yeah, we have. I mean, not that anyone cares about my personal life. Now I feel like Regis. I should be talking about my wife, Joy. I can't do his accent though. We're going to, we have a family reunion every 3 years, so usually 80 to 100 people show up for that, and it moves itself around, mainly in Germany. That's where most of my family still lives, and so yeah, it's always a nice time, see people. I mean, I've been going to these since 1997.
Good.
So yeah.
Again, since your younger days.
I mean, yes,
when you were
I was 5
to do that. So yeah, a lot of good things are happening. Again, I don't, maybe there's unsurety is maybe the way to say it, just given some economic climate. But I know also given economic climate for the industry, we do anticipate from our customer base and from prospects, potential mergers, acquisitions.
I'm fascinated to see what happens. So, CMG's up for sale, Apollo's put them up. Byron Allen's trying to fix his balance sheet, which is interesting in and of itself, because you look at a Scripps or a Sinclair, they both were able to, I think Sinclair as well, able to restructure their debt. I don't know so much about their finances at Sinclair, but I know at Scripps it probably buys them a year or two to get things organized there. But that's our alarm. That means we got 1 minute left here. I like to put that
1
on,
minute. I like
because otherwise I can't match the alarm. But we know there's going to be some consolidation, and for me, I've always said this: local television, local broadcasters have something no one else has. I mean, a streamer goes against Netflix on even playing ground, where a local broadcaster is local. They also have the free airwaves. Will the networks get into, with the shackles coming off, will the networks actually get into the local space in a bigger way, not just the major markets, but say, why don't we just put a whole footprint? Because what if a Sinclair or a Gray owns the entire United States? Do they continue with the affiliate model, or do they say, we're going to start developing and showing our own content? And then where does that leave the NBCs, the ABCs, the CBSs? So will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that it will be an interesting summer. We know there's certainly been a lot of talk, a lot of people for sale, as you've already mentioned. No deals have been completed other than, Monday Warner Brothers Discovery they're doing their split, similar to NBCU.
Comcast
that had announced earlier.
Must be the same person who names drugs has named the subsidiary of Comcast, the news.
So listen, there's a lot going on there too, right? I mean, Paramount's looking to get a deal closed. So there is a lot of activity. We'll see what happens from the deal perspective. So I think that's it for us.
Morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Probably not evening, just good morning and good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to this conversation that we are going to be having about leadership in transformational times. We have in addition to myself, I'm Rishad Tobaccowala. I'm the author of a book called Rethinking Work. And my prior career, I was the chief strategist and growth officer of a little company called Publicis Group. And we have two amazing folks today who will share some of their insights. One of them is Christina Barlow-Milano, and the other one, Christina, why don't you first introduce yourself, and then I'll move over to Al.
All right, thank you, Rishad. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me to Matrix and the team there. I am the SVP of Global Agile Transformation at AMC Networks, and I'm happy to be here participating today. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. And our other esteemed panelist is Al Lascarton. Al?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I am recently retired, but I was formerly the Senior Vice President at Hearst Television of Technology and Information Services. I'm now working as an industry consultant focusing on the media and technology vertical. And I also have some relevance to this topic. I'm on the board of a local university business school, and there I do some lecturing and mentoring on technology and organizational culture. So happy to be with you this afternoon.
Well, thank you for both of you all being here. And we're going to be speaking about a very important topic, which is leading in transformational times. Before we begin specifically, I'd like to begin, Christina, with asking you, and then Al, I'd like your perspective on the same question, which is, what do you believe is transformational leadership?
And it changes with the times, right? To your point, because I think it's both what's happening internally in an organization and also being mindful of what's happening outside an organization and how that affects people and how they work. But it was really a point of reflection in thinking about this question, because I know even at AMC with so much change that the company's gone through in general with all the mergers and acquisitions. Right now, we're talking and working through outsourcing a lot of the operations and kind of reimagining what the company looks like as a content operator, and really knowing where people are in their hearts and minds and what that relationship looks like to their work. Really enables me to understand how I steer. And I think, that to me speaks volumes to how I think about leadership in transformational times, because I am at the helm. So people are looking at me for the best way to steer them in the right way so that they're not colliding with anything, or at least anything that's going to hurt too much, but at least teach them. But it's really incumbent upon me to understand where they are, both from mentally and emotionally, and how that relationship feels to them for their work.
Fantastic. Al?
I distill the definition down to something very basic. It's a vehicle transformational leadership is a vehicle to execute change. And, that really is fundamentally based upon a leadership style that inspires and motivates followers, to achieve their outcomes, to support the strategies they're trying to execute within their organizations. And I think it's interesting because I talk a lot about technology innovation. I'm working a lot in the artificial intelligence space, and between the challenges to the media industry, which I think we're going to talk about, and the technology opportunities that are out there, it's an opportune time to talk about this topic. And organizations need to develop strategies to address the most effective ways to deal with the challenges and opportunities they have. And this leadership style is ideal for helping to define how they go about doing that. And there's many aspects of it that we can talk about, but fundamentally, it's a technique that can be effectively employed throughout an organization to achieve a positive result.
So, what the two of you all seem to agree about is that transformation is about change management, and transformation is also about people.
Mhm.
And to a great extent, I've often written change sucks, but irrelevance is even worse. So we have to obviously change. And companies don't transform and grow, people transform and grow, which is a key point that both of you all have made. With that being said, and given the transformation tends to be difficult, why shouldn't our existing leaders and the people who are listening to this say, you know what, we're going to let this happen on someone else's watch. Let's just retire and move on. And do we have to transform at all? So why is there an urgency to transform in this space? And Al, why don't you start?
Well, I think that there is a need to transform and adopt innovation for any number of reasons. They could be related to the challenges of the industry, and obviously it's very well defined about what's happening in the industry in terms of declining viewership and competition from different sources, and then dealing with internal issues like aging tech stacks and regulatory turmoil. So people need to be proactive about figuring out the strategy to deal with those issues. And then there's the environmental issues of what's happening in the political environment with increased government intervention, regulatory scrutiny, and then from the technology side, supply chain disruptions. There's so many issues that people need to focus on, that they need to go into their organizations throughout the whole organization. They're going to encounter resistance to change. They're going to find obstacles in how they implement this. They fundamentally need to set that strategy, go into the organization, and find methods of how they're going to accomplish the fundamental goals of addressing these critical issues.
Mhm.
Christina?
Yeah, no, I think very well said. Similar to echo some of what Al is saying, when you think about the relationship that people have with technology and innovation, that I think there's a lot of fear today, right? And I think when you talk to people and every AI is going to take my job, AI is going to replace half of my workforce. AI is smarter than me. Why should I bother? A lot of what you hear, kind of the rumblings throughout the organization, and what I say to my team, and what I think is important for other leaders to be able to reframe for people is, no, this is an opportunity. We're on a wave. We are on the cusp of something that is going to be revolutionary, similar to what the internet boom was, and it is the next huge wave where we have an opportunity as knowledge workers to learn how to be the orchestrators of the next wave of technology, and to be able to drive what that's going to look like and how it's going to reshape how we work. And I think when you look at it through that lens, similar to what Al is saying, and then how does that shape policy? How does that shape what's regulated and what's not, right? Conversely, and I think a lot of that is, again, incumbent upon us as leaders to, how do you reframe that for people so that they actually get excited about being involved in the change, and that they're not adverse to it and scared of it. And that's really where we step in as humans to really reshape the way people are thinking about it.
Yeah, Christina and Al, I'm right now in the Javits Center in New York. And after this, I'm going to be on a panel on whether it's called a Future of Work conference. And I'm going to be on a panel on whether agents will replace us. Okay, so very telling with the comments that Putawil made, whether it's technology stacks or AI. And I would basically sort of suggest to folks, building on exactly what both of you have said, is one is this is actually a time of potential great growth and great opportunity However, we need to embrace and learn and adapt and complement AI versus pretending it doesn't exist. It does. And it's very easy to both learn it and utilize it. The second is I don't believe that AI will itself be a differentiator for any company. I believe AI is going to be like electricity. Do you all go around and saying, my network or my television station or my content company is better than yours because I use electricity? The other person will laugh and say, what do you think? I use candlelight? So similarly, when people basically say, I am going to be AI powered company, I'm going to beat you. I'll say, well, unless the other company is asleep, they're also AI powered. And at
Mhm.
the heart of it, all of them are using exactly the base engines and to basically be the three, frontier LLM models, which you
Mhm.
build on. So the
Mhm.
differentiation really will be HI. Now, one of the interesting things, which is why which comes back also to people and ourselves, and HI may not be human intelligence. So I think about AI not as artificial intelligence, I call it alien intelligence. And the reason I call it alien intelligence is because most of you may not know, but the number one use today of AI is no longer for creativity, but it's for relationships. And the number two is for therapy. So people are sort of engaging with this. This is true. This is actually what is happening. And so it's alien intelligence. And the whole idea of human intelligence, we may not be that good. And if remember when we were growing up, they said surround yourself with people smarter than you. I remind everybody, including if you're the CEO, chief revenue officer, um, chief marketing officer of a company, if you happen to have a couple of these, chat GPTs or Claude or Gemini on your phone, when
Yeah.
you're sitting in a room with your phone, you're with someone smarter than you already. So you don't have to go too far. But I believe HI will actually be the things that you all have emphasized, which is human interaction, human imagination, human, uh, ideation, human inventiveness, which is central to the business of content and storytelling and engaging with people,
Mhm.
which I think is important. Given that, given how hard transformation is, do you all have any examples, both in or outside the industry, of companies who are starting to do this well or are on their way?
I don't have a specific example of a company, but I can tell you the work that I am doing
Yeah.
with artificial intelligence. I put things into three buckets at this point in time. There are developers out there. The coding work that they're doing is being replaced by having AI do it. The work in prompting is, helping fuel what's being done for business process change. So I think to your point to start off with, that fundamentally the companies that embrace this are going to be that much more successful because they're going to have a leg up on the others who aren't embracing it. So there was the coding aspect of this, and then workers are becoming more productive because they have co-pilots and other tools to help them do their jobs better, and they can reduce mundane tasks and they can eliminate functions like taking meeting notes on live meetings because there's tools to do that for them at this point in time, and they can become more productive about what they do. And then the third tenet of this is really business process and decision support. And I think that's where AI can be the most effective, particularly in the media business. It's a complex sale. There's aspects of this that are difficult to execute. Why not take advantage of tools that can help mine information and present that information in an impactful way to help them do their jobs more efficiently and more effectively?
Absolutely. Christina?
Yes, I love everything that Al just said, and I actually have been saying this, and the more I say it, it's so true, right? Data is the new crude oil, right? Like, gotta have it.
Mhm.
It's the most valuable thing. And that's going to be even more so in this new age that we're moving into. And it really is, like I was saying before, it's about being able to drive and orchestrate across agentic AI, all the things that you were talking about, Rishad, and kind of how humans interact with the technology, how you're able to harness that, whether it's the data that's moving across and how you're going to do the decision making based off of that. And then really what that allows is for you to, as a team, to be able to be more thoughtful about making critical decisions because you have more information to really do that in a way that your cycles aren't taken by, stripping things down, putting them back together. You're already, 2 weeks behind. So, it allows you to be more attentive to the actual problem and the job that needs to be done. It makes you more proactive, I find, and really allows you to take things down in digestible bites as opposed to feeling like you have to boil the ocean. And I think, not AI from what Val was talking about, looking at the business processes and really breaking that down and recreating something that's more manageable really allows you to step back and say, all right, does this make sense? And if not, how do we start to make sense of it, but take it down in a digestible way, as opposed to really trying to solve all the problems at once, which we all know it becomes so overwhelming that the leader doesn't just become overwhelmed, the whole team becomes paralyzed, right? And that's
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm going to sort of share, without naming specific, I'm going to first name a company who navigated something, and then more about some trends that I'm seeing across companies that build on what you'll have said. So one of the key things with AI is it's going to increase efficiencies without a doubt, and it is going to potentially increase effectiveness. So efficiency is, let's say if it's just a combination of, let's say, content and creative, you'll be able to potentially make it and version it more cost effectively. And because you will be able to potentially, as I say, marry the poetry and the plumbing, which is the media veil with the right messaging, you are likely to basically be more effective. And those are going to be very, very important. But as part of transformation, building on what you have mentioned, I would also suggest to the leaders here that they think about existential risk and opportunity, to the points made that this could be also the best of times. So I'm going to go back to show you an example of how that gets done. In 2000 and sometime in the late 2000s, I participated because like 2 CEOs ago of the New York Times, there was a gentleman called Martin Nissenhaus, and he was basically overseeing New York Times Digital. And one of the key things they put together was an innovators group. So they call it the innovation report. And in there, the big takeaways finally was, if the New York Times had looked at digital technology as just an efficiency and efficient play, they would have basically figured out a way to make their printing presses work faster, their trucks to be routed better, and continue to go the way they did. But over time, they got rid of 3 things. They got rid of the page 1 meeting. They used to have page 1 meetings for what comes on next day. They no longer have page 1 meetings. They asked themselves, do we need printing presses? What business are we really in? And are we even in the news business? So today, here are the numbers. For every 1 print subscriber, which is about 1 million, they have 10 to 12 paid digital subscribers. Second is they create massive amounts of audio and video, and not just words. And third, about 30% soon of their revenue will have nothing to do with news. It'll be recipes, Wordle, puzzles, etc. And in effect, what they did was they reimagined their business. And we have come to that particular stage, very much like both of you have said, like the digital world. Let's not just think about efficiency and effectiveness. Both of them are important, but one of the competitive advantages would be to reimagine businesses. being said, like the fact that we've talked about transformation, people, change being difficult, reimagining, can you speak a little bit more about this whole area of the challenges of being a transformational leader? Uh, it's really difficult. What are some of the obstacles that you've seen, etc.? Any one of you all first.
If you don't mind, Al, I mean, I'm in the thick of it
Please.
right now.
Yeah.
So I was brought on to AMC to actually lead the transformation of what we're doing with our outsourcing program, but there's also a business transformation going on at the same time, right? By default, whether you call it that as a real thing or not, you are going to inevitably force an internal transformation by the sheer virtue of outsourcing your operation, right? So you can pretend that's not happening, but inevitably it is. So once you start to pay attention to that, you can then start to think about how do you put people at ease and start to redirect them on what the opportunities are, right? Because those folks right out of the gate, as soon as I walked in the door, were like, here's the woman who's coming to take our jobs. Here's the woman who's coming to our world, right? And so very quickly, I had to sit down, be quiet, and open my ears and listen to what do you do? What do you want to do? What, how are you connected to your work? And, what do you see as the opportunity to how to reframe how we work better, right? How do we harness what's the potential here? And I think, getting people to a point where they feel at ease, where they can feel like they're being heard. It sounds so simple, like Al was saying at the beginning, the simple definition of what is leadership in a transformational time. But it really is that, how do you actively listen to somebody who is putting their trust in you, basically, as your new leader to say, what is my space in this land of change right now? And people revert to what's comfortable. They don't want to be in a space of which there is discomfort. So, my job as a leader is to and that's a big obstacle. How do I introduce people to a new realm, and then not only get them comfortable, but get them to participate? And, one of the ways that we've done that, actually, how we've done that, is we've introduced a quasi PI planning. It sounds very rudimentary, but it was never done in the company before. And we introduced a quarterly business planning, which brought our technology and business people together to talk, like revolutionary, right? To talk about what's best for the business. And so people had to then compromise about, all right, we're going to make a collective decision as stewards of the business of what goes first. And that means I may have to step back and my stuff may not go first, but in the end, we all win. And we all made that decision together. And that was revolutionary because folks never had done that before. So, when you start to remove some of that noise, I think people feel like they're part of the solution. And again, sounds very, of course, but these things are not easy to implement, and they are ultimately obstacles in the beginning. But working through that and being committed to that, I think, is the most important thing.
Got it. Al?
I think, Rishad, to pick up on one of the points you made, I think there's two facets of this topic that are important. That there's a leadership component of this, which I'll describe as a transformational mindset. And then there's an execution and tactics that go underneath it. I can relay a quick story of an unnamed client I'm working with, and they wanted to do some basic business process reengineering. They went about it the conventional way. They got a 7-figure capital budget. They hired a C-suite executive who built a team. They had an 18-month timeline to accomplish the project. I came into the project with some AI prompt engineers, and they completed the project in 6 weeks with a low five-figure investment in the project. Someone didn't have that transformational mindset to say maybe there's a different way to approach it. And I think the media industry is characterized being slow to change, slow to embrace change. And I think this topic is ripe for people in the media vertical. That's the transformational mindset. I think the execution is, a lot about what Christina talked about.
Mm.
There is resistance to change, particularly with long tenured staff, which is often found in our organization. People aren't embracing the fact that there may be retraining and continuing education that they may need to be involved with. And to one of the other points Christina made, there can be an over-reliance on a leadership vision. Why didn't someone say that maybe there's a better way to do this business process reengineering down the line rather than taking the conventional approach of how they did it? So I think that's a key element is that the effective communication, both up to the C-suite, down from the C-suite, involvement of the employee base at the manager level is critically important to do this. And then, to loop it back to what is a pitfall here is someone's got to ultimately have the vision and involve all the stakeholders and make sure that vision is shared across the whole organization before you can start to implement this type of approach to change and adoption of techniques related to this in their organization.
Makes sense. So over the years, I've had the opportunity to see lots of different companies. And I was obviously also working for a company when we were doing this. And in the past 6 years, I've visited about 125 different companies who have been going through different transformations. And I sort of distilled it down to what I call the 6-pack of transformation. And they are building very much on the points you'll have made. So the 6-pack of transformation is the first 3 are what most companies should do. And even today, sometimes they don't get right, but they're very difficult. The first one is have a strategy, which is I define as future competitive advantage. So if you're going to transform, it's a strategy for the future. It's not a strategy for today's pain, right? So that is to anticipate what your customers, viewers, clients will want in the future. Who will you be competing? And then what do you have to do? So that's the strategy. The second is often the strategy requires you to bring in new people or buy some new technology or merge with somebody or something of the sort, which we call the M&A plan, right? And the third, which is very difficult, is a point that, Christina, you made, is reorganization. You have to reorganize, whether it's getting people to talk to each other or reorganize. Now, over the years, we used to do that, and I used to do that with Maurice and others. We had a strategy, we had an M&A plan, spent lots of money, we had reorgs. But it kind of never worked that well till we discovered number 4, 5, and 6. And 4, 5, and 6 is exactly what you'll have been saying. The number 4 is, why is this transformation good for the people? We keep saying it's good for the company. And if you don't do it, you'll get fired. But you haven't proved to me why it's good for me. You just said it's good for the company, and if I don't do it, I'll get fired. So all you basically told me is it's bad for me, right? So we have to communicate why, to your points, both of you have made, as to why is this good for the employees. And you can come up with lots of different reasons, but I'll tell you one reason that definitely works. There are lots of other reasons besides this one reason. And that is because it's a very strange reason that if they do this, they will increase their ability to get hired elsewhere. Okay, so you're going to basically future-proof your career by doing this new stuff. And therefore, it's good for you. 5 is, how does the incentives change? And I remember many, many, many years ago, I visited Candid, and they're a very smart company. And I basically said, your future competitor is going to be Instagram. And they said, yes, we want to basically think about that, and we want to become an omnichannel multimedia company. I went back 2 years later, and everybody in the room was exactly the same, which is not a problem. But I asked the CEO, how do you give bonuses and how do you allocate power? And the answer was magazine paid sales.
Mm,
Right? So I said, people are not going to do what your stupid strategy says. They're going to basically do how they get paid and promoted.
that's
Mhm.
right.
And so if you're going to pay and promote people to do what currently makes you money, you're never going to get anywhere. You can have all your strategy, all your M&A, and all your reorganization, because people are going to do what is good for them. So as Stephen Levitt of Freakonomics fame says, show me somebody's incentive plan and I'll show you the strategy.
Mm.
Right? And the last one, which both of you all have basically made, is okay, now I know it's good for me and my incentives are somewhat aligned. How do I do this? So where's the training program? Like, how am I supposed to do this? So that six pack, very much building on what you'll say, is a strategy, M&A, reorg. But then why is it good for the people? How do you align the incentives? And where's the training program? Which I think is a lot of what you'll have basically sort of indicated and said. And the last three, the reason those three are difficult is because they're the messy parts. The first three are the Excel spreadsheets, PDF parts, right? You can write a strategy, you can buy companies, you can reorganize using pages and paper. 4, 5, and 6 is dealing with this horrible, messy thing called people. And I remember I would tell Maurice, why don't we just get rid of all these 100,000 people and start again? Because they clearly don't get it. Okay. And it didn't work that way. Now, of course, it's all worked out fine, but it's a big deal. So, and that means that also starts from all of our viewers today. The leaders, it starts with you, as
Mhm.
both of you all have sort of emphasized. With that being said, I'm going to have a last question for both of you all, and then open it up for Q&A from everybody else. Both of you all have, many, many years of experience and expertise. If you were to share, 1 or 2 points of advice, watch outs, or anything to this group, what would you say? And then we'll listen to their questions.
Well, you go first.
Al?
Sure. I was going to make one point about your six pack, but
Sure.
before I do
Yes,
this, that
absolutely.
I think, listen, we talked about media and the fact that media companies are slow to change, but the technology that's coming down is changing at such an incredibly rapid pace that I think the need for transformational thinking and leadership is exasperated by the fact that you can't even comprehend what's going to happen likely in 6 months,
Yes.
let alone a
I,
year or 2 years.
I,
And to embrace this, you really need to start thinking forward and think ahead of where can I implement something quickly and efficiently? And I kind of think that leads to the fact that I think, one or two pieces of advice that I would give is you got to take calculated risk. Yes, you got to assess what the business climate is. Yeah, you might want to think about it 6 months or 12 months in advance, but unless you start to take risk and embrace the technology, you're going to end up being behind the curve. And, that goes along with failing fast. Everything's not going to work. You got to take the risks, and hopefully the majority of things will work, but some of the things may not. What I do lecture college students about is understanding organizational culture. And before you do anything, you need to understand the culture, and culture is really hard to change. And what we're talking about does, to some extent, involve thinking about that culture and thinking about how that culture can evolve. Probably more than change is probably a better word to use there. And then going along with the themes that we said, ensuring that there's an effective dialogue between the senior leadership, operational leaders closest to the customers, so they can get a feedback loop about the changes that they need to take. And yeah, I think embracing technology, embracing change are the keys to, what I would offer as advice on how to make this successful in your company.
Yeah.
Perfect. Christina?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I have 4 things, very, very specific 4 things that I always tell my team, and I share with my peers, and just a mantra and a mindset that I keep as I start any new journey. One is always give people permission to fail, right? Fail fast, like Al said, but but help those people up, right? That's a big deal. spot your Jedis, like immediately, as soon as you get in, right? They could be anybody. They could be a BA. They could be a senior vice president. They could be somebody in a different group. Spot your Jedis. Those are the people that will always go above and beyond what their normal remit or job description is. And they get it, they know it, and they have that spark. Those are the folks that are kind of be transformational just as part of their DNA, right? To Al's point, educate yourself. Never stop reading. Never stop being curious. That is so critical for your career, for being in a room making small talk, for right all the things, for even as we age during our lifetime, right? You know, staying curious and being on top of what's going on in the world and around you, like that is just, it just keeps you fresh and engaged and just present, and staying comfortable. Stay uncomfortable. Very important. And I think those things are really, really important. Looks like
I agree with all of those, and I'll add 2 or 3. So clearly, one of the points that Al has mentioned is urgency, and 3 weeks ago, I was fortunate. So people who were running Fidelity's AI and data team had bought, and one of them had read my new book called Rethinking Work, and reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I really like this book, and will you do a webinar for me if I buy 150 copies for my teams? I said, yes, of course I will. So they gave everybody the book, and a month later, I talked with them. There were about 90 people who showed up in this room, or 100. And they asked some really interesting and tough questions. But one of the questions they asked is, since this book was professionally published, which means the last time you touched it was 6 or 7 months before it has come out in the world, and it's now 3 months since the book has come out, so it's 10 months. What did you get wrong? So what did you get wrong in your book? It's 10 months since you wrote it. And I said, I got one thing wrong, and this is to Al's point. And I said, I describe a world, why things are changing, what to do right now, and then how to get prepared for a world of 2029. And I said, what I got wrong is that world is happening in 2027. Okay. And to Al's point, when I was writing the book, AI was doubling in capabilities every 11 months. It's now doubling in capabilities every 6 months. This whole idea of urgency. So unless you decide to, any of you all who are listening to this, unless you plan to retire in approximately 180 days, you got to pay attention. Okay. This is the first thing. The second, building on the Jedi comment made by Christina, try to make sure that you place some of your best talent onto tomorrow's projects. Many companies, what they do is they place their best talent on today's revenue and today's big clients. And they actually place people they don't know what to do with onto tomorrow's projects. And that sends a very wrong message to the company. It basically says, today's projects are where the talent is going, and we're not going to put any into tomorrow's projects. And by the way, they're putting these people they don't know how to do with. But it's the equivalent of basically deciding to spend all your money sort of on flowers for your grandfather's grave versus feeding your children.
Right.
And too many businesses basically refuse to take at least 20 to 30% of their top talent against tomorrow's changes, even though they don't have revenue right now. And that's one of the big mistakes. So that's this thing about urgency on Al's point, the Jedi and finding the right people and placing them on Christina's point. The third one, which both of you all have made, is like you all, like Al, we are seasoned. So this is the way I describe myself. Instead of old or aged, I say I'm seasoned. So it sounds spicy, right?
I am old, but that's
right.
That's another point.
But we're gonna basically say we're seasoned.
Okay.
But the 2 points you'll have made with regard to that. So one is I always remind people, and this is both of you have made this point, which I'll come back to. But in this season thing, I get to speak to a lot of senior management all over the world. I just came back actually from Brazil and Canada, and then 3 weeks ago I was in India. And I believe that all senior people have the same 3 questions. So the first question is, how do they keep their business model relevant for changing and transformational times, which is what we discussed.
Mhm.
The second is, do they have the right organizational structures, talent, etc. And the third one, if you give them enough alcohol, will be this one, which is they wonder whether they are still relevant as leaders. Okay. And my answer is, of course you are, but you have to both be uncomfortable, but as important, allocate time to study and learn, at least an hour a day. Otherwise, you won't know what you're doing. And if anybody tells me that they're too old to learn, and this is what I'll leave you all with, is I remind them of a gravestone in Colombo, Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka used to be called Ceylon. It's south of India. Colombo used to be their capital. And in this gravestone, it's of a very famous gentleman called Arthur C. Clarke. And Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Mm.
And on his gravestone, it says, Arthur C. Clarke, born so-and-so, died so-and-so. And it says, Arthur C. Clarke was always growing, never grew up.
Mm.
That's
Okay.
great.
And for all of you leaders, inside you is the young woman or the young man, right? Bring him out and say, if you start with a clean sheet of paper with everything we know, and you could unleash the new world order, what would you do? And you'll find you're young again. So I'm now going to close up and ask if there are some questions that are coming through from you all, for Al or for Christina, and that would be particularly fun. So any questions?
There was a question in the chat about examples of companies and that
Right.
exemplify transformation. And I follow technology pretty quickly in all facets of this. And I think one of the great examples this week that I came across, and someone has a great appreciation for the automotive industry. And there's innovation in people coming out with products and innovation way of thinking. And the story this week was Elon Musk, put aside your feelings about him, is going to build a $10,000 car. How did he do that? How did he come up with the concept? How did he get his people thinking that he could actually do something like this? It was fascinating to me to think of the transformational thinking that had to go into the fact that someone could really do this and bring something like that to the market. So I think there's many examples of this in every industry that you can think of. But that one this week was top of mind for me.
Yeah.
And it is, and it is absolutely. Christina, you can say something.
No, it's right. Again, regardless of what you think of the man's politics, like genius, and even what he's doing with Neuralink and the research around ALS and Parkinson's, like bring it on, like
Yeah,
wonderful, right?
Absolutely. And then I'll sort of leave this also. So, one of the things we keep doing is we benchmark against our own category. One of the things in the automobile category is all the 7 or 10 original OEMs never asked the questions that they should have asked, which is, what if the future is electric? What if the future is software? And what if the future doesn't require you to own cars? And those were asked by Tesla and Uber.
Right.
But it's an outlandish question, right? And I think that's where you have the opportunity in reframing some of this, and that's where people have to get uncomfortable. Yeah.
Perfect. Fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for being there. I'm going to turn it over back to, Mark and Brenda, if they're there, or to Deanna, and thank you for your time. So over to
Thank you so
the
much.
organizers. Thank you.